Welcome back to In Pursuit of Magic, where we explore the things that inspire us, connect us, and the magic we find along the way. I'm Matthew Medina, and today's very special guest is an incredibly talented actress, host, and artist who has been part of some iconic productions like Frozen, The Little Mermaid, Mary Poppins, and Tangled the Musical. She's also well known for her sheet music art, which has become a staple for theater lovers. Anyone who's in NYC and goes to the drama bookshop, you've seen this art, you probably bought it yourself. I have one behind me. I'm very excited to welcome Emily Grace Tucker. Emily, thank you so much for being on. It's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. That was such a wonderful intro. I'm so flattered.
Well, it's true. I mean, what's amazing is that I first knew you as an artist, and then to see that you're a performer too is just incredible because you're really in that world and using different creative juices and passions that you're fulfilling. So I'm very curious in terms of being a performer, what your first inspirations were. Like, were you very young when you first were inspired to know that, oh, I want to be part of that world? And what was it that made you want to be part of it?
Yeah, so I started when I was very young dancing. So I started, dance class. My mom put me in dance class when I was like, 3. I started with like the very basic ballet, tap. And then as like continued to grow up, I continued to like really stack my dance schedule. And then in like junior high, started to get a little bit more into singing, doing some like group things. I was part of a local troupe that would do like ensemble numbers, and there was always like a theme, and we did like lots of local stuff like farmers markets and things like that. But then I did my first musical, like full musical, my freshman year of high school, and I was in Beauty and the Beast, and I was fork number no not fork, I was a plate number 3. And that was kind of it for me. Like, as soon as I did my first musical, I was like, you can kind of put these 2 worlds together and, like, tell a story. And I fell in love with it, and that really took, the rest of my trajectory kind of for a ride as soon as I did that. Going back to plate number 3. Plate number 3 is what set it off.
It's amazing how little moments like that that you think, "Oh, this is just gonna be like a fun show that I do," ends up being, like, life-changing. It's like you catch
Totally.
that bug and you feel the experience, and it just changes your whole outlook and your journey. And so I was gonna
Absolutely.
ask if there's a particular moment when you knew that this is for me, and it sounds like that's one of them. Are there any other moments that made you feel like, I know this is what I wanna do for a good portion of my life"?
Yeah, it's so funny. I knew that I wanted to pursue theater from a pretty young age, I would say, like in high school. But that being said, I didn't take like what I would consider like a normal route. I didn't go to school. I had intentions of going to school, but I was kind of late to the game of like knowing that you could even go to school for theater. So by the time that presented itself, it was like almost too late. Like I had missed deadlines, and I didn't know how to even audition for a college program. And so basically I ended up with like a short period of time where I was just kind of like waiting to figure that out. And while I was doing that, I was in LA because that's where I grew up. And I auditioned for this is not my like proudest story, but I feel like it is important to share with people because sometimes when you're young, you do think you just don't know. You just don't know. Anyways, I grew up very close to Disneyland, and I was obsessed with the Aladdin show at the Hyperion. And I auditioned for the Aladdin show, and the sweet, sweet casting director was like, "You are great. You will never be Jasmine. You will never like." I just didn't know. I just wanted to be a part of it. But they were like, "You are clearly right for this, but like not for this show. Would you be interested in Cruise Line?" And I was like, "Yes, definitely." And then I had like a 3-month waiting period before those auditions came back around. And it was one of those things where I was like twiddling my thumbs, counting down, like this audition is coming. This is like, this is what it's going to be. And like I ended up booking it. And it's so funny thinking back on it now. I was so young. I was 19, and I didn't trust myself as a singer, like, at all, but I was basically hired as a singing track. Like, yes, in rep shows, you all dance and you all do ensemble stuff in certain shows, but, like, it was really the first time that anyone was like, "No, you can sing and lead this. Like, you can be the main character." And that was really, like, the end of it for me. Like, as soon as played my first, like, role with Disney, I was like, "Okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing forever," and then it just kind of took off from there. That is really, like, one of my first experiences where, like, my mom came to see it, and she was like she's heard me sing my entire life, but it's just different when you go and you're used to them, being kind of like the dancer or the whatever. I don't know. And she was like so shocked by seeing me be like a singer. I don't know. It's so funny. I have such a vivid memory of that. And from then on it was like, oh, I'm gonna be doing this and like really locking into that and letting it, take its road. I mean, I say that because I didn't end up going to school. I eventually just like got back from cruise line, booked a show, got an agent, booked another show, and it just like tumbled from there, which ended up being great.
Part of what's beautiful about that story is that it could have been a heartbreaking moment going to Disneyland and auditioning for that role. And yet it was just kind of diverting you to somewhere else that you didn't expect, which I hear from so many people that that's their story. And it's beautiful and it's magical because it kind of takes you where you need to be when it could have easily been someone being like, this isn't for you. You don't belong here. Sorry. And
Totally.
that would have been heartbreaking and so easily could have stopped you in your tracks. And I'm glad that it was more of like, this may not be right, but I know it is. And
Yeah.
how that can propel you to these places you never expected. And you may even be surprising yourself. I mean, you talked about your mom seeing you. Was that experience something that made you look at yourself differently?
I mean, my mom has always been the most supportive of me in theater and doing dance classes and taking me to and from all of the things, growing up. And like I said, growing up in LA close to Disney, the roots ran very deep by the time I actually was like part of the company. Having my mom come and sail and see me, in this new experience and like specifically that it was Disney and like it was such a huge part of my childhood, not just the movies, but going to Disneyland. Like I would have done it for free. Like they don't know that. And thank goodness I was like, no, you can still pay me. But like, I think if you would have asked me to do it for free when I was 19, I would have been like, yes. Like it just wasn't, it was just such a different headspace. And to be able to like share that with her and have her come and get to like experience it is like still to this day like so so special and for lack of a better word like magical. It is so magical to like have her come and see. I just did Frozen twice last year, and like while I didn't grow up with that because obviously that came out when I was an adult, it's still fun to like have her come and see the little girls all dressed up in the audience and like know that that was me. That was me when I was that age, as I would dress up in all the different costumes and, you know, go to the parks or go see shows and things like that. So it's really cool in full circle that I get to share that with her and she gets to be a part of it.
Yeah, as someone who also grew up with the love of those movies and the parks, completely understand what you're saying and coming from because there is something magical about that experience. And then now you being part of it and creating that magic for others is beautiful. And I gotta
Yeah, it's
imagine
so
that's
funny.
kind of been a whirlwind.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think too, like lots of people think of like working for the mouse as like, doing like the children's shows or the family shows. But there's really nothing you can compare it to that like means so much to so many people on like a very deep, deep level. It is unlike any other, like I've done other theater that's not Disney related, obviously, and like people are still moved by it and they are still, but like there is something so different about watching like a grown man sob because their little girl, Anna blew a kiss to his little girl also dressed as Anna. Like I've seen men just like weep and I'm like, man, that is special. That is, you just can't compare it to anything else. It is like so, so, so like the base of it is just joy. Like being able to bring people joy is like what the entire company is about. And I do not, I should say, blanket statement, I do not currently work for Disney, but I do believe in what they're doing. And I think that what they do is like so important to so many people. And not a lot of people give them even like some of that credit, I think. I think that it's like, it gets hard when it feels like it's expensive or to go or it's, like I don't know, everyone has, like, their opinions, and I'm just over here like, "Man, they create joy like, whoa." Like, there's no one like them who can create joy like that. It's just so special.
Absolutely, and even as you're talking about that experience, I'm thinking I have a six-month-old daughter, and yeah, if that happened with my daughter for her favorite character, I'd also be a wreck. So I completely get it.
A wreck, like, I grew up loving The Little Mermaid. Absolutely, like, obsessed. You know, I had the dolls, I had, all those things, and then, like, the first time I did Little Mermaid was at an amphitheater in Utah called Tuacahn, and I got to fly, and, like, it was this big, epic, epic production, and it was so cool, like, to be close to home too. I had lots of people from California who, like, knew me growing up come and see it, and they're like, "You're doing it! Like, you're doing the thing that you wanted to do when you were little," that, like, everyone jokes, like, "Oh, she wants to be Ariel," like, "She's obsessed with Ariel," or "She's obsessed with this movie, XYZ," and, like, not a lot of people get to say, like, she, like not only did she live her childhood dream, she, like, was the dream. You know what I mean? Like, she was it. It's very cool. And I definitely never take it for granted. It's something that I will hold near and dear to me forever, forever and ever.
Yeah, I gotta imagine that's just going to stay with you with every experience you go towards in the future. And I'm wondering about
Definitely.
all those experiences and how community in theater and on these ensembles and friendships kind of affects your experience. How does it help in a schedule that sometimes could be tiring and overwhelming and just a lot to get used to?
Yeah. A lot of my closest friendships as an adult came from theater contracts. I can't really put my finger on, like, I'm, like, looking at a wall of all of my photos of, like, friends, and they're all people I met through theater. Even my husband, I met through theater. He's a MD and a pianist, and we met through the business, and it is one of those things where it's, like, such a small world on one hand, like, you feel like you see the same people over and over again, but the relationships are so unique, and so I think different from, like, what I say, like, muggles would experience, like, non-theater people. You, like, live with these people, you eat with these people, you rehearse with these people, you perform with these people, you're vulnerable with these people, you're spitting on these people, you're kissing these people. It's just like it is so bonding so quickly because it breaks down all the barriers that, like, normal friendships would take time to build. The concentration of time, that you are all putting into one thing, and also having a common goal of, like, everyone wants the show to be good, Nobody goes into a contract and is like, I hope this show is terrible. We're all there being like, we just want to put on the best show that we can be proud of. And I think that, like, putting a bunch of strangers in a group with concentrated time with the same goal is what definitely produces such special friendships that last forever. Like, I met someone, my friend Julius, I met like 10 years ago on a contract in Indiana, and he sang at my wedding. And, like, it's just like so crazy that those relationships, you go in and you don't really know. When you're auditioning, you're like, I'm here for the job, I'm here for the health weeks, I'm here for because I want to perform, but then there's so much else that comes out of it that is so much longer lasting, and it's the friendships for sure. Like, I'm, like, thinking about, like, all the contracts that I've done, and I'm like, you know, the things that stick out the most are the people that I've kept from each of them, as opposed to, like, the experience itself and the performing itself.
Yeah, I think it really feels like you create a family on that stage and behind
Definitely.
the scenes. And that lasts. Yeah, I think it also kind of goes on to after each show ends and you're moving on to other projects and going through life and the ups and downs and the in-betweens. I hear a lot about sometimes it's like a flood of stuff happening and other times there's a drought. And in those
Yeah,
moments, it can get hard because you feel like it's lonely, and yet there's so many other people now who are also going through that roller coaster. And so I'm
totally.
curious how you are able to manage those moments of either disappointments or closed doors or things not working out the way you thought they would.
Goodness. This is I'm very open about, like, mental health and trying to be, like, as straight of a shooter as I possibly can. Um, and be like transparent about it. It's hard. It never gets easier. I was rejected from a job I really wanted like a week ago that was like not even something that big of a deal. And I had like a full meltdown about it. So it never gets easier, I would say. I do know that there are things that help, me. One of them is having other things. I think there is a common, I don't want to say teaching because first of all I didn't go to school, but like also like there's like a common thought process that like, you have to be so committed to the craft and like your whole world needs to be, you need all of your free time. You should be practicing or researching and I do not subscribe to that. I think that it is unhealthy for me. And I think having other things is like really, really, really important. It's how sheet music art was born. But in addition to that, it's like finding hobbies that have absolutely nothing to do with theater, I think is really, really important and not necessarily what people expect to hear from me. I do a lot of like talkbacks and things like that on shows and with kids, and I try to be as straight with them as possible that like, they're like, what's your secret to success and like how did you get here and what did you have to do, and I'm like I had to like solo travel and I had to learn about, I have like a lot of plants that I love to take care of and like learn about, and like it's just having other things be a part of your life. Like I purposely try to cultivate my social media, like what I see, on my end, not necessarily what I post, but what I see I try to cultivate to be as non-theater related as possible. It's like dogs, plants, zoos, aquariums, people washing rugs. I don't know. Like I try to give my brain more things to think about because if you're only focused on theater, that is when that rejection gets really, really hard to bounce back from because it becomes everything. And I think for me, it's important to have other things that will like help me bounce back. And because it never gets easier. So I still struggle with it, but I think everyone does. Even like the big, big names still also struggle with it. But I've really adopted this kind of energy somewhat recently of like when I go into auditions, trying to be as fully myself as possible and not putting on like, you know, a persona and like, "Hi, I'm Emily," and all of a sudden my voice shoots up like 3 octaves, and I'm like, and everything's great, and yeah, I can do whatever you want. You want another cut? Sure." Trying to just come in and be a little bit more me, and that seems to help also post. If I don't get the job, it is helpful for me to be like, "Well, I just kinda went in and said, like, this is what I have to offer, and if it doesn't work out, then, like, I was never gonna book that job." And that way I have less to overthink later as well. I'm not like sitting at home being like, I should have done this, I should have done that. Because like when you're in that room, there are no shoulds and shouldn'ts. You are like in full fight or flight. And you can take all the audition classes you need, and I think those are very important. They taught me a lot of important like base skills, but as far as like how you respond and react, it's hard. Nerves are such a weird thing and we all care so much. So, you can prepare as much as you want, but you're not always going to respond. Sometimes you're going to react and you may not feel like it was the best response, but you're human. And so that having that mindset has been helpful as well with like trying to bounce back from when I don't get things and when things are disappointing and hard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. You're human at the end of the day, and I think it's a good perspective to have where, the reason that you do get those nerves and that feeling from it is because you do care so much. And I
Yeah.
love the idea that, if something doesn't work out, it's because it was never gonna happen anyway. It wasn't meant for you. But there is something else that is meant for you, and you're gonna come and find it. The idea of having other things that you could pour your passions into is also beautiful. There was a recent guest I had who said something similar and how important it is, and not enough people say it. But it's so amazing and important to not define yourself by just one thing because we're humans, we're more than one thing. And I also think in this industry, as much as we love the creative side of it, there's also a lot of pressure to kind of conform to the system of it, and that takes away a lot of the humanity of the performers. And so I think the way that you are approaching it and tackling it and being honest with it is a beautiful thing because we need more people to talk about it that way.
Totally. I think it's something that should be talked about. People are getting a little bit more honest about it, I think, on social media with like, how influencers, I'm not an influencer by any means, but like I'm seeing more and more influencers talk about some of the real side of it. Um and when I do, it's refreshing. It is good to remind people and good to like put it in perspective for sure.
And, I think another idea you said about cultivating your social media, yeah, I think that is a very important thing to do. I think also limiting how much you're on social media, sometimes if you need a break is a great idea. Just because it's never the full picture, it's never the full story. One of the things I love talking about here on this podcast is those harder moments because not everyone talks about them. And I think it's important for anyone who's following a dream to know that they're not alone when they go through them. Like everyone does, and it's so common, it's so normal, and we're stronger together and we lean on each other. And I think that's when those friendships and those connections really come in handy.
But yeah, definitely.
And, I have to ask because we talked a little bit about your time on the cruise line and working with Disney, and Tangled the musical is not something that is on the stages here in New York yet. But maybe one day, but it is on the cruise line. So I have to ask about that experience because it was kind of the first of its kind.
Yeah, definitely. Disney Theatrical and Disney Cruise Line and Disney Parks, they're all under one umbrella, but they're also, somewhat separate. And Tangled was one of the first times where they had like a separate New York creative team and they were treating it more like a musical or like a Disney theatrical production than necessarily like a cruise ship production. Now, that's not to say that like the cruise ship productions aren't also spectacular. Like they've got some really great shows. But Tangled was kind of the start of it and then they followed up with there's a Frozen show now and then they did a remake of Beauty and the Beast, which is now I have not seen personally, but I know Connor Gallagher who did Tangled and also I did the Elf tour with him as well. Was the director of that and that looks beautiful. So it's really cool to see Disney kind of like take what is successful on land and put it at sea and treat it a little bit more like a proper show than like entertainment, if that makes sense. Like I feel like sometimes the cruise ship shows get a reputation of just being like entertainment and like I call them Disney soup shows. It's like the shows where there's like so many characters and you're trying to like weave them together into a cohesive, you know, plot. Like the Golden Mickeys is like my personal fave. It
Yeah.
is so beautiful and perfect in the way that they do it. But Tangled was like, we're going to do a musical and we're going to pick one plot. And there was even a moment where we had playbills. Wait, I can show you. I literally have this on my wall because for the first like couple of cruises of Tangled being open, they had playbills, which they don't do anymore. So this was when we first
That's so
opened
nice too.
Tangled. And, like, it was like a, like a cute thing, and it had, like, has our bios in it and, like, all this stuff. They did not last very long, which is why I, like, now have it I'm like, "Remember when we had playbills?" And, yeah, it was, like, obviously wildly successful. Alan Menken wrote some new music as well for the show that is stunning. I mean, the man is a genius. We all know that, but the new music that he wrote for it is also so good. So, so, so good. So I hope that it gets its day in New York. I really, really do. I would absolutely, love to watch it and or be a part of it, but it is such great music and such a beloved story that I think it would do so successful. It would be so successful on stage in a full musical.
Absolutely, and I like how you described how Disney theatrical has really been, like, upping their productions because 'cause I've noticed that with all those shows happening, and I've even seen the behind the scenes of Hercules and one of the newest ships and how they're doing the
Yeah,
Titans and all that, and yeah, they're really
totally.
going all out, so it's amazing to see, and I have to ask about your schedule then because I know on a cruise line, it could be intense, it could be pretty busy.
Yeah. I was on 3 and 4 day cruises, which basically means you're doing 2 cruises a week. Whereas, like some cruises, if you are doing like a 1 week, if you're on like a 1 week itinerary, you're only doing the shows once a week. You know what I mean? Like we would do Tangled one night a week. But if you're doing 2 day cruise, I'm sorry, 2 cruises a week, then you're doing those shows twice a week. But remember, you're doing rep. So if you're on a 3 and 4 day cruise, you are doing shows every single day, like every single day. And now, mind you, they are shorter. You have other responsibilities, things like that. But if you are lucky enough to be put on a ship that has a different itinerary, like I'd look at people on like another ship and I'd be like, wow, they're just chilling. Like they have days off. Now I thought it was so crazy. I was like, how do they have days off? We never have days off. And it's just because, if you have 3 shows, 4 shows, to divide between a week, you're gonna have days off in the middle. Whereas like my cruise ship, I was on 3 and 4 days the entire time. So I was always working. Always, always. But I was so happy to do it. Like I wasn't begging for a day off. I don't, now that I'm older, I'm like, man, I wish I had days off. But I just didn't feel that way back then. I was just happy to be in the shows. So I do miss it a lot. I think about it like often in like such a lovely way that, but now that I'm married and I have a dog and I have a business and I have, it's not as conducive to my lifestyle anymore. But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. Um, Cruise ships are so hard. I mean, you are just not in real life, and especially back then, I'm gonna age myself, there wasn't, like you would, like, really go into the middle of the ocean and, like, lose contact with people. We didn't have like, we had Wi-Fi, but it wasn't good Wi-Fi, and you couldn't, like, talk on the phone, you could send, like, texts, and you were paying per minute and things like that. Now it's very different, and there's, like, Wi-Fi everywhere, that is, like, strong, and I've seen people, like, FaceTime on the ship, and I'm like, "That's crazy." I did not do that. I got on that ship, and I said goodbye to everything, I was like, totally secluded. But now I look back on it and I'm like, "Oh, that would be fun." Maybe I would go and do like, you know, just like a stint. Just a short stint. But I don't wanna be away from my husband or my dogs, so it's difficult.
Yeah, it's tough to do that, and I think even before you had all the roots that are keeping you here now, I think it's just a tough schedule to get into, and I applaud everyone who does stuff on a cruise line because I feel like it trains them to be able to handle anything, just everything you have to
Oh my
do. And I'm
gosh.
wondering, was your contract just performing on stage, or did you have like entertainment stuff throughout the day too?
Yeah, so I had a couple of different, like what did they call them? Like enhancements. So, if it was like Christmas time, we did Christmas caroling or, we had specialty cruises or like when new movies would drop and things like that, we had like extra things we would do, like little shows here and there. One of the coolest experiences I had was with TCM chartered the ship, like Turner Classic Movies, and we did a bunch of like extra performances like within the theme of Turner Classic Movies. And it was so cool. Like I always loved the little extra stuff, especially when like, you doing it for a very long time. It's kind of nice to have something new and be like something different. So, and like, sometimes they would support the crew, like doing cruise shows was always really fun, or doing cabarets that were like not with it. That was more like behind the scenes and like for the crew than it was for like the guests. But every once in a while it would be for guests, and that would be cool too, to just do like, I know it sounds bad, but like non-Disney material on a Disney contract.
No, I gotta imagine that is fun to switch it up and then to figure out how to do that with your castmates and the friends that you've made on the ship. And it just gives a
Yeah.
variety to all the productions you're doing. And it makes me wonder, in terms of all the productions you've done in your career so far and characters you've played, is there anyone that specifically left an impact on you and you still think about as being kind of life changing for yourself?
Entangled was definitely up there. That is one I look back on very, very fondly. It's so funny. The other one that comes to mind is Little Mermaid at Tuacahn. It was just like a larger than life production, and it was an outdoor amphitheater, and I had never done anything outdoors like that, and it is really, really unique. It is, as someone who's like, I love being outside. I will, like right now I am like slowly dying because it's so cold and we haven't had sun in weeks. But I'm like, if it is sunny, I am outside. I am like a plant. I photosynthesize. I like talk to the sun. So doing a show outside in the Red Rock was like so unique, so, so cool. And then for the production to happen to be The Little Mermaid is also just like the, you know, the way that that lined up is like really, really cool and unique. And I'm terrified of heights, hate them, and I keep doing shows where I have to fly. So that show also had I learned a lot about myself doing that because I was so anxious. I mean, it was so scary. And that theater is massive. And you're not like 20 feet in the air. You're like 75 feet in the air. You know what I mean? Like you are high. So, kind of learning to conquer that. And it made me a really smart performer as well, because when you're in the elements, you're dealing with the elements. There are bugs, there are bats, it rains, it's cold, it's hot, there's wind, like you have to really be malleable. And I think that that was what I took away from that contract. And I would love to return there. I've returned there in like scene shows, and it is just so, so unique and magical and special. And so that's definitely on the list as well. And oddly enough, got to reprise playing Rapunzel while I was at Tuacahn. We did a show called When You Wish, which is kind of like a Disney soup show, calling back to that type of show where it's a bunch of Disney characters, and it's just When You Wish is just production number after production number after production number. But there was a Rapunzel section, and I was Rapunzel, and I was like, and so that was kind of fun to revisit that. I was like, wow, this just like keeps coming back around. Like I was there to play Ariel in Little Mermaid, but then, with rep casting, you never know where you're going to fall. And happened to fall into Rapunzel, which was like perfect. And also in that show, I got to play Jane in the Tarzan section opposite Josh, who was the original Tarzan on Broadway. So that was also uniquely very cool and very, nerdy for me back then, just to be like, I'm playing like opposite the actual Tarzan. And he's the best. And we're still friends. We're birthday buddies. We're like 2 days apart. So, but he's the best, and he was great to work with. And I just remember being in rehearsal for that show specifically, and like being opposite him, and him, going from his normal self to like he just kind of drops into that character in a way that's almost like jarring. You're kind of like, oh, it's Josh. And then all of a sudden when he drops into that, his body and like the way he moves, the way he breathes, the way it's just like, it's really, really cool. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a like Disney theater nerd's dream. I was like, this is so cool. And for him to be obviously so nice off stage, and we had a great time and stuff. But like, for like a theater fan who also loves Disney, that was also very unique. So Tuacahn was kind of one of those contracts for me that I was like, wow, this feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I was like, oh, this is this timing and this show and this season and the people was really, it was really nice. It was one of those moments where I was very content. I was very like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So that's always really nice when you can kind of feel that peace when you're on a contract.
Absolutely. And just hearing about it, like I'm geeking out as a Disney fan and a theater fan, hearing your
Yeah.
experiences. So I feel the magic of those experiences as you're describing them. And your love for theater has also channeled into your artwork, which is incredible and has definitely made an impact here in New York. So I'm curious how you got started in doing that and if you remember your first piece.
This is so funny because I was worried. It's kind of started. I figured it out while I was at Tuacahn. The first piece I did was for a fundraiser. Some dear friends of mine that I met doing a show. Their father passed away from cancer, and every year they did a fundraising concert, and all of the money that was raised would go towards cancer research. And their theme is always like essentially like any form of art. So it was like there were tappers, there was poetry, there were singers, there were dancers. It was like all these different art forms all in one kind of event. And I had just started painting like a year before. And mostly at that time, I was working with acrylic paint, which is wild to me because I rarely use acrylic now. But I made my first piece was a bluebird on a piece of like old, like when you used to buy sheet music, and it was like one song. It was like one song in like a folder. And the paper's super thick and like glossy. Um, and I painted a bluebird on a song that was like, I want to say it was called like The Singing Bluebird. Like it wasn't anything earth shattering. It was just like I paint and I do music. And like this event is all about like combining all the different art forms. Let me try to paint on this, sheet music. And I did. And it sold right away in the auction. And lots of people were coming up to me being like, do you have more of these? And I was like, no, I don't. This was just for this event. People were like, you should do this more. Do you take requests? And I was like, I don't think you understand. I did this last night. And like, there's nothing else that exists. It just was like what I did last night for this event. But it like started the ball moving. And then was at Tuacon doing that season because that happened in like February of 2019. And then I went to Tuacon and you're gone for like 7 months. And while I was there, I was still playing with the idea and I found some sheet music at one of their like thrift stores that was like thick. And I was like, okay, let me try and figure this out. So I was still using acrylic paint on like the true, like old school printed, but it was very limiting because there were no songs, past the 50s or whatever. And then also, I don't know if the 50s is correct. I'll have to fact check that. I don't know when they stopped printing individual songs. But the point is, I was trying to figure that out. And then, someone was like, hey, will you make me? I remember just like very specifically one of the cast members asking me to make them a Hades Town sheet music art. And I was like, I can't because I can't paint acrylic paint on just like regular paper. It'll just disintegrate. But I spent that summer when I had off time on vocal rest because while the elements are great, you're still in a desert and you are flying in a desert and you are still singing in a desert. And I was just like trying to be quiet during the day before shows. And so I took the time to like, okay, what if I did watercolor? What if and just played with it for several months and started to take commissions just from cast and like posted them on Instagram. And I was charging people like 20 bucks for an original, which is bonkers now. Also because I would be like, now I'm like, please give them back. Can I redo them for you? Because I look at some of the old ones and I'm like, oh, this is not good. But it had such humble beginnings. And I just didn't really know. I was figuring it out. So now I look back at it and I'm like, oh, can I redo that for you? Can I do a real one? That's so old and it's not figured out yet. Like, give it back. But it eventually then, got back. I lived in Spain for a bit. That's a whole other story. But then, like, when I got back, the world shut down from COVID. And I was just like trying to make ends meet. And I was teaching painting classes online. And that was when I started sharing more sheet music art stuff with like these classes, like these big groups of people from all over the world that were trying to get together, virtually and do something fun. And that 2020 was when it really started to like get popular and more people were ordering it and sharing it on social media. And it's one of the reasons I have such a complicated relationship with social media is because it really gave me so much. Like it gave me my business. It was word of mouth. It was people posting. It was people sharing that like had that, created what it is now. So as much as I hate social media and feel like it is not real and the trap of comparison is so awful, at the same time I'm so grateful for it because it like really it was like free marketing. It gave my business a whole platform and it just really took off from there, which is crazy. Just not the intention. That's I think what's important when I talk about this when people ask me about sheet music art. I'm like, I really did not set out to do this. It just happened. And so it was a lot of learning on my feet and like lots of mistakes. And now it's a pretty like well worked out system, but I'm still figuring things out. Like I'm still, you know, things come up all the time where I'm like, I don't know. Like, we're going into tax season and I have to get a new whatever. I don't know. It's just like, you're constantly learning. But I think that if I had set out to do this, I never would have done it. Like, I think that that's what's cool about it is if I had been like, I'm going to start a business and it's going to be great and I'm going to sell in, drama bookshop. None of that. I would have just been like, no, that is way too hard. There's no way that's going to happen. And just like, peace out. But because it happened gradually and not really intentionally, now I have goals that I set for myself that I work towards. But for a while, it was just like, well, this came in, so I guess I'm doing this. Yeah, it was not what it is now, which is cool.
It's really cool because it seems like that's some of the best stuff when you kinda just fall into something, and it takes you to places you didn't expect, and you kinda surprise yourself about what you're capable of. I think, like you said, not imagining that it would turn into what it turned into kind of helped you get there in the first place, and
Definitely.
I think the most beautiful thing about a creative's life or anyone's life really, but especially when you're a creative, is surprising yourself of what you're capable of doing and the heights you're
Mm,
capable of achieving. And I think that also COVID happening when it did may have boosted the social media stuff and given that a boost, and it's just amazing how little things kinda come together and create
the silver
these magic
linings,
moments. Exactly. And so the way that that happens is just really incredible, and, was is there a specific moment at all that stands out from your time in doing this sheet music art where maybe that really lives in your head as a moment you're like, "Wow, I can't believe I'm doing this."
Yeah. A couple, I don't, now I'm like, when was this? Like a year and a half ago, I got an email from this guy, Joey Mervis, and he was just like, it just like through my website, he was like, hey, my name's Joey. I've been watching your, business grow and I work for Broadway World and I think that there is potential for a collaboration here and I would love to talk to you about it. And he was the one that just like really got that ball rolling. It was just like one person being like, I like this. I believe in this. I see what this is becoming. I see the potential. And like, I have the platform to help it. And I have photos of myself receiving that email because I remember being like, this could change. This could be like a game changer. I was like, to have that kind of exposure and those kind of opportunities to meet more people who would like this was really a game-changing moment for me. And that first red carpet that I did was the first sheet music art red carpet I did was Sunset Boulevard, which is just like crazy. And I was on the red carpet with my art and like with the Broadway World team, and we were just having all the cast sign it and watching people's reactions to it. I was like, "Oh, people like this. Like, cool." There was so much imposter syndrome going into it that I was like, "Oh, this could be so awkward." Like, I could stand there with it and be like, "Can you sign this?" And then be like, "That's ugly." No, no one would do that. But like, anxiety. Your brain tells you these things. So to like watch people come up and be like, "Hey, would you mind signing this?" They're then being like gushing over it and being like, "This is so cool." I'm like, great. Just like, and I remember having that moment being like, people do like this. Okay, cool. I'm going to run with that. It's just like, and it happened. I just did 11 to Midnight, the Costin Mayer show off Broadway. I did like 2 nights ago. And just watching Meredith and Austin, their real names, uh, see it and like their responses of like, this is so cool. And I'm just like, it doesn't get old because there is still part of me that shows up and is like, I don't Costa Mayer are not like, mainstream theater people. So like I don't know if they know what this is. I don't know if they're gonna care. I don't know if they're gonna, be like, all right, and they were so like so kind and gushing about it that I was like, it's wild how I still get nervous about people's reactions and responses. And then once I get like, this is so cool, I'm like, oh my God. Just like, great. Glad you like it. I'm sweating. So that is still not getting old. I'm still dealing with that a lot in a good way.
Completely understandable too. I yeah, and I don't blame you. I think that that nerve of, like, I think, like you said, imposter syndrome partially, and then sharing it with someone else, that human connection becomes so important and such a beautiful thing. And usually never a bad outcome. It's just the nerves beforehand. I tend to draw, I sketch first and then I scan it into my iPad and then I draw digitally. And I've started doing stuff you could see a little behind me, like playbill
Yeah,
covers, customs of like whatever actor is currently in the show and stuff like that.
yeah,
And getting to share that with some of them at stage door has been very similar. Like, I hope they
yeah,
like it. I hope they react well. Oh my god! And then the relief when they do. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I
totally.
think to kind of give that back and say, I love this show or I love your performance, and them saying I love your art, and it's just this beautiful back and forth that is kind of in its own little bubble, despite being surrounded by so many people.
Yeah, especially when it's of them. Like, it's one thing for someone to be like, "Oh, I love your" I'm just saying maybe happy ending because it's behind you. Like, "I love your maybe happy ending art." I'm like, "That's great." But then standing in front of Darren Criss and being like, "It's of you," is different. It's like, it is different. It is like, "Oh gosh, this is like of him, of his performance. This represents him." You know what I mean? And then for him to be like, "This is so cool." You're like, "Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. I can breathe again. Great. Glad you like it. Have a good one." Just like trying to be as it's like,
Well, it's clear that with your art and also in your performances, you're creating magic all the time. And I'm very curious in terms of how do you hope to create magic for others personally, if you could decide?
man, that is such a great I mean, it's so funny yes, I do a lot of theater art. But I also do a lot of other things as well. As far as like in art as art goes. One of the things that I have done for a lot of the people in my life are like pet portraits when their animals die, or like I'm literally doing one right now. I did a reading a couple weeks ago with this woman who is like was someone I worked with for a week, and then she posted that her dog died, and I like started painting her dog for her. Just like something that like means a lot to people and is not necessarily for anything are some of the work I love doing the most. Like I love doing a pet portrait, especially for someone who like didn't order it. As a pet owner, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, if someone gifted me, a painting of my dog and I didn't even ask for it, I would lose my shit." Like it's stuff like that that is like that creates so much joy and it is so personal to them. So that is definitely one of my answers. Another thing that I think is really important and like I think I have brought up a couple times now is just like trying to be as transparent as possible. That way people get maybe it may not spark joy for them, but it may bring them some relief, which I think is important. I think, we all get in our head, and sometimes I think that doing your best is enough, as opposed to like, you know, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is like being transparent is also another form of like elevating someone without necessarily bringing them like making them laugh out loud or making them, it's not life changing necessarily, but it is important in that moment. Yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think your transparency and vulnerability and how you share things and your story and your journey. I know it's helped me just talking to you and comparing it to things I've experienced or what I'm thinking and feeling lately. So that's always helpful. And
Yeah,
I think it's helpful to other people too.
I'm
And
so
before we
glad.
wrap up, I do want to ask if there's anything else you are currently working on that you're allowed to talk about. And if you want to share your website, your links where to find you and how to order stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So everything is under my full name, Emily Grace Tucker. And you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. It's also my Etsy shop name. Any sort of like, if you Google sheet music art or EGT sheet music art, that also comes up. Um, right now, what I'm working on, a great question. I do not have any theater work lined up just yet. I am auditioning at the moment. And so can't plug anything like that just yet, which I think is important to say. I think that's important to be transparent about. But I will plug that
And
like
yet you're busy, and yet you're doing things.
Totally, totally. But it's so funny. I think that like people hate the question, like, what are you doing next after they're like getting off of a show? I was really lucky to work almost all of last year. I did like 4 contracts in a year, which is not normal for me. And like I thought was so special and so unique. And now that I don't have anything on the horizon, I'm like, save that, because people are always like, what's next? And I'm like, I haven't booked anything. It might change, but it might not for a bit. So let's start there. What am I working on? I'm always working on sheet music art. Always, always, always. Always trying to expand. I have a goal for this year to get into another brick and mortar. I currently sell at Drama Bookshop and they are the best. My work is like really supported there and loved there, and the people there are very kind. So I'm loving that experience and I would love to get it into more brick and mortars because I think it's really fun for people to take, like, people have been stage dooring with it a lot, and it's so cool because then, like, they have a piece of something that they have signed that's not, like, yes, obviously, like, playbills are cool too, but this is a little bit more, like, specific to a person sometimes. So, always working on sheet music art, always working on expanding and figuring out, like, what's next for sheet music art, and that is definitely one of them, is getting into another brick and mortar. Don't know what it is yet. That's on my list for this year. Um, I've also the thing that I'm, like, hesitant to talk about is, like, I have really wanted to illustrate a children's book for a long time, but I don't feel qualified yet. So, that is something that I am exploring, and, like, I have a couple of opportunities that have presented themselves for me to do so, but I'm very transparent with people about, like, "Give me a minute, let me make sure that I can do this and do a good job, and I'll get back to you." So I am also in the process of that. Like, I'm taking online classes and kind of learning what my style would be for something like that because it is different than sheet music art, obviously. So that is also something that I'm like in the background being quiet about, like trying to figure out. So that's also what I'm working
Well,
on.
you're definitely gonna do it because you did it with the sheet music. You took time to figure out how to do it, and you got there,
That's
and
the
it went
plan.
far beyond what you thought you were capable of. So,
I
I know
also
this is gonna
think
be a
this
big year
year
for you.
I think this year too, I might get into some like more like merch. I've had some issues with people, unfortunately, stealing my art and like printing it on tote bags or putting it on, all these things. And I'm like, what if I did that? Would they still steal it if I did it myself? So that is also something that I'm like figuring out on the back end, but it's so complicated. It's so hard. I'm only one person, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Lots of things
especially
to look forward to.
because sites like Redbubble. Yeah, and I think sites like Redbubble are harder because really you're not really making much from it. You're getting like a penny. So you really want to find a way to produce it yourself. And yeah, it takes a lot of moving gears. But if anyone can figure it out, it's you. I know you're in the middle of
Thank
so
you.
many different things that you're figuring out, and I know you will. You are a magic maker. It has been a pleasure talking to you and very inspiring, Emily. You're welcome back anytime to update us on what you're up to. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And everyone out there, go ahead and do some magic. See you next time.